Okay, it is Tuesday, November 21st, 2017, at 7:30 PM, and I hereby convene and call to order the City of Ojai Building Appeals Board. Roll call.
Member Daddy,
Here.
Board Member Farmer,
Here.
Chair Ulrich.
Here.
I see that Member Murphy is absent, but myself am here.
Pretty good. Okay. I have no cards for public communication, and, excuse me?
Flag salute?
Oh, yeah, excuse me, sorry. And lacking that, we're going to do the flag salute.
Okay. Would you,
Yes, I will. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, once again, lacking any public communications or any speaker cards, we will move to the building officials' report.
Good evening, board members. I have 4 items for you this evening. I wanted to let you know that January 9th is the tentative date for the recommendations for promoting the second dwelling unit compliance program to be brought to City Council. That is a tentative date, but it has been scheduled for January 9th. At the last meeting last week, Council voted 3-2 not to adopt any of the suggested ratifications from Ventura County Fire Department. There was some questions that kept coming up as to why this issue keeps coming up every 3 years, and it's because the code adoption cycle is every 3 years, and every 3 years the fire department brings it back for ratification. That's why we keep seeing it every 3 years. Yeah. And then I just wanted to make sure that we are going to have a quorum next month for our December 19th meeting for CAL FIRE. The Ventura County Fire Department reached out to me today to make sure that we are doing that because CAL FIRE is working on their travel arrangements. So they're making hotel reservations and travel arrangements coming down from Sacramento. So just wanted to ensure that. Yes?
Chair, could I make a further inquiry in response to that?
Would this have to do with the form of the meeting or the description of the meeting?
Otherwise invited to the meeting.
Yes, please do.
Last night at the Municipal Advisory Council, if I could direct my question to the building official, that's okay.
Absolutely, please do.
The county was talking about updating the fire maps in the unincorporated area, and they were very interested in the fact that CAL FIRE was going to be here for an update meeting. And they were very interested in the possibility of participating or at least attending and possibly participating in the December 19th meeting. Would that be okay? Some of the representatives from county?
I don't have a problem with that. Who
Is this
should I
County Planning
extend?
Department? County Planning?
Ventura County Planning, is there a
Ventura County
specific
Planning?
person?
I'd have to get that to you. I've lost it in my head walking around today.
Okay, if you get me the information, I will
Okay.
certainly let them know.
And Steve Offerman also indicated an interest, that Steve Bennett's office might be interested. So,
Who's Steve Bennett?
Board of Supervisor, and Steve Offerman is one of his chiefs of staff, one of his staff people, liaison people. So if that might work with the concurrence of the, I'll just sort of spread the fact that this meeting is attending, and that might, they occur so rarely that the other officials from the representing the unincorporated area were interested in also attending.
If you send me a couple names, I will make sure that they get
Okay.
invited, and I will let Ventura County Fire know that we're
Yes.
doing that.
Okay, good.
Mayor Pro Tem, before you leave, Chair.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
I just
No, and I do need you to just stay there. Chair Ulrich,
Yes.
are the county is interested in participating or attending
at least the people that were at the meeting last night.
The December 19th CAL FIRE meeting. Someone needs to be personally responsible for interacting with the county. I do not want this to be an information meeting where we teach them the rules and they don't know the rules. If they're going to come and they're going to participate and we're going to have CAL FIRE here, they're going to have read every one of the different pages and codes, so they understand what's involved, because we cannot be here tutoring them as an on-the-spot.
I'd be happy to convey that this is a working meeting and that anyone who attends should be well-versed in background material.
Well, I'd like to correct the way the meeting's been characterized. This is not a meeting, I'm considering this since we have CAL FIRE representatives, and also because there's interest from other public agencies. There's going to be a hearing, okay? The presentation materials that may or may not be provided by CAL FIRE are going to be included in among the questions and issues that we have presenting the city right now, which has to do with the CAL FIRE map, with the enforcement of various state fire codes, and also, obviously, the interplay with the county fire department, the county planning.
Yeah,
Just a point, should we be discussing this
No.
when we're in our item for the
It
fire
should be,
map?
yeah, so I should be backing off, because I was just responding to an information report, exactly, okay? But they know that they're having to update, they're in the update cycle as well, and we might as well consolidate efforts. I think there seemed to be a lot of appetite for considering that.
Okay,
Okay,
then we can discuss all your ideas
yeah,
during the item. Okay, that was all I had.
I think there'll be no issue with a quorum, so to speak. Okay, right, so that was so once again, and on the city council meeting in one night, at least prospectively, on the city council, at the city council meeting of 1/9/18, what is going to be?
I will be bringing forward your recommendations from the last meeting on promoting the second dwelling unit compliance program.
Okay. Okay. Right. Is there, there may be some other issues in looking over the minutes of the September 19 and the October 17 meeting that that were the subject of resolutions and votes. So let's see if any of that needs to get before the city council as well.
Chair,
Yes.
we have the minutes. Would it be possible as soon as early next week to get a copy of what your recommendation will be on the January 9th? Because we've already gone through our meetings and we've already made our recommendations. And I imagine the recommendations you make are going to be,
Exactly the same that you recommended.
oh no, that's not what I'm saying, in
Oh.
a different format than what's in our minutes.
I was just planning on making the recommendation in the list form in the order that we had discussed them in the meeting.
Okay, but that's not in this packet.
No, I just found out tonight that it was going to be
Okay.
going on the.
So
on the
then,
ninth.
could we get an email that shows what's in there?
Sure.
So we have a chance to recollect what we recollect and make sure that a yes wasn't a no.
Sure.
So they'll be voting on that night. Is that right? I'm sorry.
Microphone.
So on the 9th of January, Renee, the council will vote on our recommendations? Is that where they just discuss them?
I'm assuming they will discuss them. I don't know if a
Will it be any kind of a
vote's
vote?
necessary. I don't know.
Okay.
I'll just be taking, the assignment was to make the recommendations. You made the recommendations. I'm going to take the recommendations back to
All right.
council.
Thanks, yeah.
Could be a discussion item.
Okay. In that case, I'd like to start with the, going over the draft minutes for the September 19 meeting. Page 1, Building Officials Report, and this makes reference to, retroactively to the August 1, 2017 BAB meeting. and this makes reference specifically to the differential in processing time, the 120 days, as between the accessory dwelling unit compliance program and the ADU program. It's my understanding, pursuant to a conversation I had with a city council member, that this information is either not accurate or does not comport with the intent of the council when those timeframes were voted upon and passed by the city council.
So the minutes, the BAB had a question. I responded to the question from the city attorney, and this item isn't on discussion for tonight. This is just a reporting of the minutes, and we will be dealing with these kinds of items when we're dealing with the rewrite of Title IX, if you guys want to redo that. So when we go through the minutes, we're just kind of going through the minutes.
And exactly what I'm doing is going through the minutes. This is inaccurate information, okay? I'm making a point of it. The issues that I'm going to also be going over have to do with information requested by this body and information not received to date, just so we keep a tracking of it, because it seems to keep falling off the edge of the plate, and I'd like to keep it on the plate since they're important issues, and also time before this board and the board members' time has been expended on it, and I'd like to keep it where it belongs. Okay, going to page 3 of 9. This referenced a request to agendize the fee study, to agendize the item, the issue of fees relative to Building Appeals Board appeals fees. So at this particular point, more than 6 weeks has transpired. I haven't heard anything to the contrary relative to a fee study consultant having come to any conclusions. Has anything changed with that?
I have no update from the finance director on this yet.
Okay, since this was on the September 19 minutes, that Board Member Daddy made a request to agendize the item, and 6 weeks has transpired, I would request that it's agendized for the next meeting.
The BAB doesn't specifically have direction from council to discuss this item. However, we could bring it up possibly in the Title IX review.
I don't believe that the Building Appeals Board requires, in order to agendize an item, the specific direction of the council. Where did you get that impression from?
Because we serve at the direction of council for all the items that we discuss other than an appeal.
This concerns the actual operations and the appeal process for this body. As such, it is of interest to this body and is of interest to the community, notwithstanding whether there's been specific direction.
I will have to confirm that if we want to agendize it outside of the Title IX discussion rewrite. I can confirm with the city manager.
I really don't understand. I don't know what Title IX rewrite encompasses, so from a practical perspective, you probably know more about that than I do. At this point, I'm looking at a specific item. Whether it needs to be contained within that or not, I don't want it to be precluded because someone has made a unilateral determination that it isn't included.
The Title IX rewrite, we're going through every part of Title IX, which includes all of the appeals processes for the Building Appeals Board.
Okay, fabulous in that case. So then, if I understand it correctly, it will be agendized as part of the Title IX review.
Yeah, it'll be all part of the Title IX review.
When is that going to take place?
I think that's the February 20th meeting.
Okay, and then at that point, we're looking at the fee issue for the Building Appeals Board, and we're also looking at the time frame for filing an appeal.
That's all part of Title IX.
Okay. I'm making specific point about those two specific items since they were both requested to be specifically agendized. So, okay. Then on page 5 of 9, they're not terribly important or significant. However, there's some typos here that I cannot understand what, or comprehend the latter portion of the main paragraph in the center of discussion item number 3. And this, we're quoting apparently Mayor Pro Tem Wyrick comments relative to SB 229. Does anyone have any, starting from about the 6th line from the bottom, there's words that don't follow that. I'm going to presume the RANA numbers are supposed to be RHNA. Is that accurate?
All right, Jim.
Okay, right. The last line on the page, Mayor Pro Tem Wyrick felt the Sanitary District 2 statement that is not a financial impediment to those trying to legalize non-conforming units defies reason and logic. So if that can get redrafted so it's comports with the comments and is intelligible. Let's see here. Page 7. We had a motion and a second to continue the subject in, relative to the footing depth, 27 inches versus 12 inches. Will that be coming back also in February?
I thought the motion was made and we voted that we would keep the existing 12-inch that we have now due to a lack of seismic and to the fact that, I'll go back and memorialize the tape if we need to, and to the fact that the reasoning was is that everybody else in Ventura was doing it. And at that time I was the chair. I didn't believe that we should do what everybody else should do without an actual reason to make a change. So my recollection was is that we voted, I abstained, the motion carried, that we would not change it to 27 inches.
Right, but the line...
No, that's okay. You're right in your procedure. I just want to make sure the record's correct on what the vote was.
Correct. And the line beneath that indicates that the building officials stated she needs a complete code amendment recommendation to take to council and needs a complete package for Title IX rewrite. So I'm going to assume that is going to be something we're going to look at in February.
I need a...
It
Why
may
would we
be part
need
of
a title?
February and March. The
Okay.
entire code amendment packet, we pushed until after the fire map and the other items.
Until then, it remains where it is at 12 inches.
Right, it remains as the state code
Right.
with no amendments.
Okay, and what does that mean as far as the state code, as far as actual dimensions?
It is 12 inches.
12 inches with a soil sample,
Okay,
correct?
No, for some stuff, a soils report wouldn't be necessary, it'd just be 12 inches.
okay.
The soils report's not always necessary for state code.
Okay, who determines that? Because
The building official,
we had a 160 square foot shed that
the,
needed a soil sample or 27 inch.
you have to get me the address, I'd have to do the research on the project.
I'll give you that. It's 606 Eucalyptus Street. It was Boyd Ford's second house. At that time, our building official was Brian Meadows.
Well, that's years ago, I'm talking about something that's today. If you have a
Yeah.
project today, since I've been the building official, please let me know and I'll do some research.
No, we haven't run into that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. I don't have anything else for this particular.
I make a motion that we adopt the minutes from
Are you finished?
Yes, I am.
September and move to the next item 2.
Subject to those modifications.
Well, you've stated that.
Okay, and then move to October, the draft minutes for the October. Oh, excuse me. That's true. Is someone going to say?
I second the motion.
Okay,
And shall I call?
yes.
Board Member Daddy,
Yes.
Board Member Farmer,
Yes.
Board Chair Ulrich,
Yes.
and myself, yes.
Draft minutes of the Building Appeals Board for October 17, 2017. Okay, there's a reference to the input not having been received from the consultant regarding the aforementioned appeal fee, so we've already covered that. On page 2 of 5, there's a reference to the CAL FIRE individual who's going to be representing CAL FIRE, Gene Potke. Is there any contact information for him?
I don't have contact information for him.
Okay, he's out of Monterey or San Luis Obispo?
I spoke with Ryan Carai of Ventura County Fire today. He said these people are coming out of Sacramento.
Ooh, better. Who did you say the contact was?
Gene Potke, middle of the page, just beneath building official Mario on page 2 of 5.
Got to be on the right page first.
And where is he from?
I believe he's coming out of Sacramento.
When I did a Google on him, it showed him, at least in the Google search, may not be absolutely current, but it did show him in San Luis. So
I don't know. Like I said, I just spoke with Ryan from Fire, and he mentioned people
that
coming
is
from Sacramento.
that's our regional control, I guess, for Ventura County, is based in San Luis, Santa Barbara, and Ventura County. My understanding, as far as CAL FIRE's structure. Okay. Then at the bottom of page 2 of 5, we have board member Daddy recommended the board send printed references regarding the fire map directly to the building official or city manager if needed. What was that? The intent of that?
On 2 of 5?
2 of 5 of the
On the
October
bottom.
17 draft minutes. Bottom of the
I
page.
think that should be directly from.
From? Okay, well, that's a big difference.
I thought that was when you suggested, Bob, that if any of the board had information about the fire map, that they send it directly to the building official or city manager, so then I could distribute it to the remaining board members and not create a Brown Act
Oh,
violation.
okay. I didn't remember that in regard to the actual fire map, because we have the fire map. I think it was.
No,
other
it was about information
But
that
that's.
you had
but
about the
that's,
fire map.
That's fine. That works for me.
Okay. On page 3 of 5, we have the motion. Board member Hanson made a motion to approve the agendized schedule items as discussed. So there was a vote on that, and at this point, when do we expect to see the agendized schedule? Has that been included?
The agendized schedule is the schedule for each subsequent meeting.
Right.
And that is on page
2 of 5?
2 of 5, and okay, so having said that, the February 20th task, a one-time review and report to council on contradictions, missing cross-references, or other issues to requiring code text amendments in service to clarity and integrity of Title IX of the Municipal Code, will have to have some other items added to that agenda. Because while, for example, the specific issues that have been brought up relative to the Building Appeals Board appeal term, the appeal fee, et cetera, are included within Title IX, this task, a one-time review and report to council, I don't know that we're going to be able to do all of that in that. in one
I
meeting.
anticipate it taking multiple meetings.
Okay, so perhaps then that description of it should be revised to reflect that.
The description is exactly per the wording of the task list. I'm not quite sure what you mean to reword it.
Can I make a suggestion? I think it's a one-time review, not a one-meeting review. It's a one-time review with multiple meetings.
All right.
Does
I'll
that
go- I'll
accurately
go with that.
describe it?
Okay, I'll go with that. Okay, page 4 of 5. And this is the reference, once again, to the input. The board requested that the building officials seek the input from the city attorney for the clarification on the distinction between the ADU compliance program and the ADU program under state law in the city, including specifics to conversion. So when, and there's also some,
I didn't understand that you wanted that information back. I thought that was one of your recommendations to council, was to direct the city attorney to get that clarification. Maybe I misunderstood what your item was. I thought it was just one of your recommendations to council.
we've had questions to you over the period of several meetings regarding these programs, and you either had, weren't sure about them, or the information that you were given perhaps came from either the community development director or your understanding from having reviewed the ordinances yourself. At this point, there are questions that we have, and I will say it from the perspective of being the Housing Appeals Board as well, that I think are pertinent to the community. It's not clear to us, and we've been looking at this stuff for months, if not years, the current state of the distinction between ADU compliance program and the accessory dwelling unit program is, that's in compliance with state law, and also some of the language within it. For example, the specific language relative to how does one distinguish whether they're primary owner. The references that are made into various codes, zones, A, VMU, O, PL, or R, whether there's any distinctions there.
So it seems like the program has been established. It's been approved by the Planning Commission and the City Council. The Building Appeals Board's task was to make recommendations on how to promote the program, which we completed last week. So I'm not exactly sure why we're discussing the program. I guess I'm a little confused.
That's the compliance program.
That's the only thing that we have been directed to discuss by the council.
Okay, but an ADU program isn't a component of Title IX?
I don't know where they put it. It probably is in Title 10.
Okay, so at this particular point, then we're saying it really isn't anything we have to deal with.
Correct.
I don't know that is correct, but I'll take it at that point. I've raised the issue. At this point,
Can I get clarity on that question?
Yeah.
I don't think the ADUs are anything we need to deal with, because that's a whole different universe. The compliance, there were some questions, and we'd talked about the law seems to be changing, whether it was 220 on the minimum, whether it went to the 150, then it went to the well, it didn't go to the one. The law changed to 120, but it doesn't take effect until July of 2018. And so it's continually evolving, so you can't even wrap your head around it. And then we have another law and another law. You know, we had 1069 and 229. Then we had SB 35 come in. And so it appears that it's going to continue to evolve permanently. And it appears that until we sunset the compliance program, there may be some room to make changes in that. So we'll see between now and March of 2019 how many of these we get in. And when you talked about the 120 days in the first section, well, I finally understood that. One's from drop off and one's from get all your information in. That's why those two appear to almost be the same.
Mhm. Yeah.
Between the ADU and the compliance, and the 120 is not 120 days. And that's because one has to do with the time you drop off the plans for the permit. One has to do with the time you get everything in order for them to process the permit. So those are two, I mean, one's 120 days, one could be a year, just because it's a totally different program.
Okay.
Okay?
Right? Yep. The compliance program is 120 days from the date the city deems the application complete. Okay, all right. Then, I think that's all I have for that.
I make a motion that we accept the minutes in item 2.
I'll
Second second the motion.
Okay. Member Daddy?
Yes.
Member Farmer?
Yes.
Chair Ulrich?
Yes,
Myself, yes.
okay. Item number 3. We have a administrative report.
So at the City Council meeting of July 11, 2017, the council assigned 5 tasks for the Building Appeals Board to complete. This item is one of the tasks, which is to make amendments to the CAL FIRE map for incorporated and unincorporated areas within the Ojai sphere of influence. We have CAL FIRE coming on December 19th, and I see this meeting as a preparation for that meeting, for the board to be prepared, develop, and discuss questions for CAL FIRE at that next meeting. I've included in your packet some of the California codes that I could find, and that Member Daddy sent me some information about the fire maps, and that's what I included in your packet.
And they're very complete. Thank you very much. There's a lot of reading and an awful lot of definitions that affect everything. I would make a request. This is out of order. I believe maybe the chair would make the same request. When it talks about the sphere of influence, as is stated in CAL FIRE, that fires don't stop and start on boundaries, and they don't start and stop anywhere. And so when we're taking a look at the sphere of influence in the unincorporated area, it would be nice to know what that mapping area is. And if we're looking at the sphere of influence, it would also be nice and may be available from CAL FIRE, the entire valley map that shows where everybody was charged an annual $150 fire mitigation fee, so we can then make the connection between those that the state has deemed to be severe or high fire hazard, like Rancho Matilaha and Upper Foothill out of the city, and the other areas where they're getting these administrative fees because of the fire hazard. And then we can kind of put those in and see if they bump up against everywhere in the perimeter of the city, because where we don't have a high fire and the county does, it's not going to stop at that line. So I think for clarity, it would be good to look at that. I know the fee was dropped about 6 months ago, but there was a reason to go ahead and draw those lines. So if that's something we could get, I think that'd be a tremendous help.
And also just from a, for the record, if if we're going to be amending, we're going to be making recommendations for the amendment to the city's CAL FIRE map for incorporated, unincorporated areas within the Ojai sphere of influence, that extends quite a bit beyond the city limits. And the CAL FIRE map, to the best of my knowledge, all we have seen only is inclusive of the city limits.
I think there's some other maps online if you look at the county unincorporated area, but they break them down, but I'll ask.
Well, that's what the recommendation is, so I'm simply saying that I've not seen a map officially presented to us for review pursuant to this review that has anything beyond the city limits. So that's Ojai sphere of influence. My understanding of it extends to quite at least the square mileage of the city again. That's a lot more space, and in incorporating the incorporated and unincorporated areas, there's a lot of space that has a lot of combustible fuel in that. Okay,
Chair,
yes.
to go back and reiterate that again, more specific than looking at the general Ventura County map that is online, and you can see the red splashed around. I think it would be incredibly important to see the map of those people that have administrative fees because of the severity. Just painting a map is one thing, but actually charging people for the last 10 years $150 fee is going to show what the actual severity was. If it weren't there, I doubt they would have charged
Right.
that or put that program together. So it would be good to
Okay.
take a look at that.
Right. Okay, does anybody want to start in a place in particular, or shall I start with my markup?
You could start with your markup. I would ask a question. There's an awful lot of language in here, building official, that looks like it goes back a few decades, and when I see reference to CDF instead of CAL FIRE, that goes back quite a ways too. And I'm assuming that this is absolutely the newest of everything they currently have on their update. Okay.
It's the most current I could find.
Okay. With that in mind, I asked the chair if it's possible to pursue this with getting the format together to make a map revision to actually reflect today's current conditions in the city. And so, again, that's what my intent is, not tonight, but the intent tonight is to take a look at the dozens of different codes that control any change that's going to be made and make sure we really understand what these different codes mean. So with that, Chair, thank you.
Okay, start with attachment A, page 1 of 7, California Government Code, section 51177. Definition of local agency: city, county, city and county or district responsible for fire protection within a very high fire hazard severity zone. So my question is that Ventura County Fire Department? Is that the local agency that's referenced for our purposes in this review?
Would you reference that code?
51177, and it's referenced in 51175 as the intent of the legislature that this chapter apply to all local agencies, including but not limited to charter cities, charter counties, charter cities and counties, and other local agencies. So that's the definition. So that was the question.
I don't have these answers. I'm just going to create the questions and submit them,
Okay,
because
okay.
this is outside my area of expertise.
Yeah, okay, and that's fine. I'm asking these questions because the California state code seems to make reference to a local agency, and I'd like to know who it is. If that's the city of Ojai, okay. If it's Ventura County, but it makes specific reference to is responsible for fire protection within a very high fire hazard severity zone, and I don't see how that would be the city, or at least the city all by itself. Okay.
Excuse me,
yes.
Bill. Is this not some of the questions that we're going to have on December the 19th meeting to the,
Correct.
people
In
that
fact,
come here?
if we develop these questions tonight, I plan on forwarding them to fire so that they can be prepared for the answers that you need.
Well, I would ask then the board, if the board would delegate responsibility to me as the chair to draft bullet points of some of these questions and then submit them to Renee for transmittal to CAL FIRE.
And we can have input.
Excuse me?
And we can have input.
Well, yeah, I'll draft them up and then everybody can take a look at them, see if they're comprehensive.
I think that's a great
and accurate.
idea, yes.
Okay, all right.
For Brown Act purposes, they need to be referred to the building official, correct?
Yes.
From the chair
Correct.
to the
Then I
building,
can
and then
send
you
them to
can-
the board members. If board members have comment, they bring it back to me.
Okay, very good. All right.
Please,
so-
you're going to reference that, right, back, make sure you put that in the cover.
All right, page 2, once again, this is still attachment A, page 2 of 7, top of the page, 51-178. On or before January 1, 1995, so this is going back, what's that, 27 years? No, excuse me, 22 years. It makes reference specifically to the county of Ventura, and it makes reference to a director. I don't know who that is. That also is not clear. As far as the person that's responsible for identification. That may be now CAL FIRE, but I don't believe CAL FIRE was in existence in 95. Also, then, and that was subsection B. Subsection C says, on or before January 1, 1996, the director shall identify areas as very high fire hazard severity zones in all other counties. This information shall be transmitted to all local agencies with identified high fire hazard severity zones within 30 days. So my question is, did that happen? And that's simply a mechanical action. The next item is 51-178.5. Once again, it makes a reference to the director, and if that's presently CAL FIRE, that would be helpful to know who is responsible for the transmittal of the identification of very high fire hazard severity zones. But also a local agency, which is the city or the Ventura County Fire Department, shall make the information available for public review. So my question on that one is, where is that information made available? Is it posted on the internet? Is it posted in offices? I just tried looking up the Ventura County very high fire hazard map on my iPad here, and in order to get any clarity on it, I had to enlarge it, and when I enlarged it, all of the clarity went away. So the question on that one is, in order to enlarge it, whether it's actually legible, if you have to have a large enough screen for it. So my initial effort there was unsuccessful, and I don't think that's the concept of public review. All right, page 3 of 7. This is subsection G up at the top. It says a local agency shall post a notice at the office of the county recorder, county assessor, and county planning agency identifying the location of the map provided by the director pursuant to section 51178. Did that happen? When did it happen? And where did it happen? I've been down to the county recorder's office, and I'm not aware of anything out on that. Or in the county assessor's office, at least something that's very apparent. Perhaps I missed it. Section 51181. The middle of that paragraph makes reference to the director shall periodically review the areas in the state identified as very high fire hazard severity zones pursuant to this chapter, and as necessary shall make recommendations relative to very high fire hazard severity zones. This review shall coincide with the review of state responsibility area lands every 5 years and when possible fall within the timeframes for each county's general plan update. Now, since we've heard testimony from Ventura County Fire Department that CAL FIRE skipped a generation of a fire map in 2015, that is a question I'd like to take testimony from the CAL FIRE representative concerning the circumstances that prevented them from updating the map, and also when the projection is for a forthcoming update.
Chair, I'd like to add a few things if possible.
Absolutely.
And the question, this is for the benefit of the community, but it would be beneficial if CAL FIRE would tell us where we are in the cycle, where we are with recording, producing maps, displaying maps, complying with all of their own codes in here. And the other thing that we're going to get into later, which you might want to make a note now, and when we discover it through the end of the packet, we'll discover it. There's some very definitive wording about the necessity to have this map available because of a disclosure for real estate transaction requirements within a very high fire hazard zones. And so without a map being displayed, without everything online, and not even really knowing if we in fact adopted the 2010 map, it makes it pretty tough, and it has some very severe legal ramifications for anybody transacting business in that area, of which we have 270 identified homes now. So if they would kind of help us understand that, you know, it's okay if they skip a cycle and we do every 10 instead of the mandated 5, and then the prior things remain or don't remain or whatever. I kind of want to know where the ball's going now. The other thing is, I guess, is it their intention to let this sit idle for a few more years until they get caught up with their 5-year cycle? So these are things I want to have CAL FIRE have the benefit of. I would really rather hate to ask them and just kind of blindside them. I'd rather them be able to research it, give us the codes, the documents, the things that are necessary, because I'm under the assumption that since a local agency can change the rules, and a city is a local agency, and when the local agency has findings, it can't be contested by any other outside authority, that it appears that this city has the absolute right and the ability to change the fire map now based on what they have in their rules. So I want to find out where we're right and where we're wrong, at least in that assumption.
And this is California state law. This isn't a function of policy of either CAL FIRE or the Ventura County Fire or any local agency. These are, according to my reading, California State Government Code, and and they have shall in almost every paragraph. Okay. And 51-182 places the burden upon a person who owns, leases, controls, operates, or maintains any occupied dwelling or occupied structure in, upon, or adjoining any mountainous area, forest-covered land, brush-covered land, grass-covered land, or any land that is covered with flammable material, which area or land is within a very high fire hazard severity zone designated by the local agency pursuant to section 51179, and they shall at all times do all of the following, where it goes on about brush clearance to 30 feet, within 100 feet of the occupied dwelling or occupied structure, or 100 feet to the property line. Or at a greater distance if required by state law or local ordinance, rule, or regulation. I don't, my, that was subsection 2 on page 4 of 7. Subsection 3 indicates that that property owner shall remove that portion of a tree that extends within 10 feet of the outlet of any chimney or stovepipe. Number 4, maintain any tree adjacent to or overhanging any building free of dead or dying wood. Number 5, maintain the roof of any structure free of leaves, needles, or other dead vegetative growth. I don't believe that any of these things have been enforced. So at this point, what is, I think we do need to know what CAL FIRE's policy is relative to enforcement of 51-182, and whose responsibility is it for enforcement. On page 5 of 7, it goes on page 4, ends in subsection B, and then on page 5 it goes to subsection E. It looks like it's missing C and D. So we need to get those, and they may have some trenchant material on them. Section 50, and once again, this is on page 5 of 7. 51-184. It makes reference to section 51-182 shall not apply in 4 specific exemptions. And they make reference to habitat for endangered or threatened species, lands kept in a predominantly natural state as habitat for wildlife, plant or animal communities, open space lands that are environmentally sensitive parklands, and other lands having scenic values as declared by the local agency or by state or federal law. So in other words, unless specifically exempted, everything else is included in the very high fire severity zone and the necessary compliance relative to clearances they're subject to. So that's also a question just to clarify.
Can you restate what the question was?
That unless unless a property or land is specifically exempted by within the 4 exemptions of 51-184, they're subject to all the requirements of the balance of the government code. Let's see, then once again, this is still on 51-184D. In the event that any lands adjacent to any land or water described in subdivision A, and those were the exemptions, are improved such that they are subject to 51-182, the obligation to comply with 51-182 shall be with the person owning, leasing, controlling, operating, or maintaining the occupied dwelling or occupied structure. It kind of seems to be that way. That's my reading of it, but I'd like to know if it's CAL FIRE policy.
May I interject, Chair?
Yes, please do.
Building official, if you could make a special note subject to 1184D under A, section 51182, I would like to have a definition by whoever is the authority on this as to improved. So we have a section that is at the top of a street, and it was improved by planting a forest, which is no longer viable. And so I'm wondering if that improvement then includes that section of this city under the statute. Improved means planting, clearing, building, a whole bunch of things, but I kind of want to know who's responsible for the definition and what it is, because that will then give us the ability not only to extend the 100-foot clearance, but we can go ahead and make that clearance in certain areas 300 feet. Okay, thank you.
Okay, page 6 of 7, 51-187. Since section 51-182 is the controlling, overarching government code section, this section, 51-187, indicates that any violation of 51-182 may be considered a public nuisance pursuant to section 38-773, which provides enforcement methodology to local public agencies. And I would like that's a question I would like to have confirmed.
The question is,
Does a violation of section 51-182 pursuant to section 51-187, once it may be, if it's considered a public nuisance, can it be enforced via section 38-773? In other words, is that the mechanism?
Chair, question of clarity.
Yes.
Any violation of section 1182 may be considered a public nuisance, and so it would be nice to know what that controlling language is.
The threshold?
The threshold is if they were cited a year and a half ago and failed to clean up, and now they're cited again and they failed to clean up. If it is a public nuisance and emergency measures can go in, for example, and clear the place with 24, 48, 72-hour notice. There's got to be some type of controlling number in there. And then the city can go ahead and remove the hazard. So it would be nice to know exactly to the extent that the maybe and the 38-773 give specificity.
Okay. 51-189, the legislature finds and declares that space and structure defensibility is essential to effective fire prevention. This defensibility extends beyond the vegetation management practices required by this chapter and includes, but is not limited to, measures that increase the likelihood of a structure to withstand intrusion by fire, such as building design, construction requirements that use fire-resistant building materials, provide protection of structure protections, etc. Subsection B states that no later than January 1, 2005, the State Fire Marshal, in consultation with the Director of Forestry and Fire Protection and the Director of Housing and Community Development, shall, pursuant to Section 18930 of the Health and Safety Code, recommend building standards that provide for comprehensive space and structure defensibility to protect structures from fire spreading from adjacent structures or vegetation, and vegetation from fire spreading from adjacent structures. Now, this is within the scope of very high fire hazard zone, since that's the subject matter. Question I have is, did CAL FIRE make those recommendations, and where are they? Okay, page 7 of 7, 51183.5 in the middle of the page. A transferor of real property that is located within a very high fire hazard severity zone which is designated pursuant to this chapter, shall disclose to any prospective transferee the fact that the property is located within a very high fire hazard severity zone and is subject to the requirements of section 51182.
Is that being done?
Yeah, that's,
We have two realtors. here.
that's my question, is that being done? Is that being enforced? Is it being has it being sufficiently publicized that the real estate community knows that they're obligated to do that by California government code?
We do have a hazard booklet that we send out to each person who are buying property, and it states if they're in a high flood zone, a high fire zone, or whatever. Now, I don't know how specific it is and how current it is. That I don't know. But we do have a booklet that we have to give.
Yeah, there's not a specific disclosure that they sign that I'm aware of,
No, I don't think so.
but there is a booklet that we provide them.
Well, actually, further down in this, in section C, it says in all transactions that are subject to section 1103 of the Civil Code, which I believe applies to real property transfers, the disclosure required by subdivision A of this section shall be provided by either of the following means, and it gives you the form. Local option real estate disclosure statement or a natural hazard disclosure statement.
Yes, we have that.
So that's more than a booklet.
Well, like I'm saying, we do have that, but I don't know how updated it is. That I don't know.
Mhm.
And that may be
Yeah, I
something-
can, I
Well,
can
it
look
doesn't,
into
a
it.
booklet would not equate and comply with this requirement. You have all of those disclosure statements, and there's quite a few of them, obviously. These are numbered 1102 and 1103.
I will check it.
And I know that, that the transfer disclosure statements start with the TD11 and go with addendums from there.
Yeah, I can almost guarantee that this has been covered,
With the NHD.
right.
With,
But I'll,
that a transfer of a
right, yeah, I'll follow up
very high
with that.
fire severity zone,
Yeah.
because that all obviously also would affect fire availability or of fire insurance. Okay, that's all I have for that section. Does anybody have anything they want to add to it?
I would like to put a note in there to make a recommendation for future action. When the map is corrected to current local conditions, that the city notify every licensed real estate agency within the city that there is a current map available and where and how they can obtain it. So they can go ahead and look and see. Just so it protects the people buying, it protects the realtor selling, it protects the seller.
Well, in subsection D, it even provides if the map or accompanying information is not of sufficient accuracy or scale that a reasonable person can determine if the subject property is included in it, the transferor shall mark yes on the natural hazard disclosure statement. Kind of covers it.
I think we do.
Excuse me?
I think we do.
Yeah, we do. We do.
Okay.
Now that this, but
The NHD covers that.
yeah. The natural hazard disclosures is what she's referring to.
It usually has check boxes you have to
It does.
identify.
It
It's not
does.
Right.
so
It, and they
the question is whether local realtors are aware, are on notice that they're noticing transfers and transferees.
It's part of the escrow procedure.
It should be.
It is.
Okay, good. Right,
But I'll check it out for you, Bill, and her.
right. Attachment B, 1 of 1. It's Appendix G. Are you aware if this is currently in effect? Has it been superseded, changed at all?
I'm not aware of any changes. This was, did you send this to me?
I could have, this is probably the Bates, and
It is
what-
the Bates.
What my question was, is it's one of the few documents that actually has a date on it, because it says April 2000. I'm wondering if this has any relevance at all. It does talk about amending in classification, what caught my eye in here is that
Class B roof, the fifth
we must
bullet.
adopt a local ordinance which requires at least a Class B roof for all construction. What I wanted to get put in here was this. What is required, and I don't know who needs to require it, an elimination along the lines of what Pasadena did, was they did a phase out. So the maps were adopted in 2007, they were introduced in 2010, and Pasadena gave everybody 5 years to remove all existing wood shingle roofs, Class C, except mills, heritage, and other certain landmarks, which by state law are allowed to have those, if that's what part of that landmarking is. And so I would like to make sure that somewhere in this discussion, when we make a recommendation to council, we have the information or the wherewithal to understand how we make a recommendation that we have a removal and we become a fire-safe community by not having these flying shingles.
So that's more on our code amendment than on the fire map?
Oh, no, I understand that in the code
Oh,
amendment,
okay,
but
I'm
I
just-
want to make sure it's somewhere. No, the fire, I don't think the fire map's going to matter. Although it says Class B, but yeah, and that'll be a code amendment we can get to. I just want to understand where we need to have the basis for doing that.
Okay. I'm going to assume that either this document, since it makes reference to the addition of Government Code Section 51175 at SEC, and amended Health and Safety Code Section 13108.5, is either still in effect or it has a successor. It seems to make reference to CDF, which might be the California Division of Forestry, as far as a designated lead agency. But what is most significant to me is the next to the last bullet point at the bottom. It states that requires that local agencies allow for public review of identified very high fire hazard severity zone in the form of maps within 30 days of notification by the CDF director. Now, I remember the interest of either some of the members or all of the members of this board in the what we, for use of shorthand, make reference to as the fire map. Started with, where is it, do we have one? It's my understanding that the sole map that the city has is in the building official's office?
Posted in the lobby, right outside the building counter. If you face the counter, it's up on the wall.
Okay, and when did that get posted there?
After you guys suggested it get posted.
Oh, good, all
So it's
right.
been there for a while.
Awesome,
Right,
awesome.
so-
Thank you very much.
Thank you, okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, because I do remember a question, which was, why do we need this? And I think the state government code is provided all sorts of reasons for that. Okay, let's see here. I'm on attachment C. Does anybody have anything else they want to add to that previous attachment? Okay, I've got attachment C, page 5 of 6. Bullet points make reference to class descriptions given.
What happened to page 1 of 16?
1 of 16?
Guidelines for fire hazard zoning,
16.
review and validation.
Did you, well, I'm
He's moving right
following
along.
my markup. If you've got something to add, then please, we'll backtrack to Page 1 of 16.
Yeah, I would, on page 1 of 16, it doesn't have a date. It's guidelines for fire housing zoning review and validation, which is going to be something very important for us to be able to move this thing forward. When we get into definitions, I don't want to get into a lot of definitions. I want to get into just a couple of things. When we start talking about modeling, it says in the very middle of the first giant paragraph, but has no information regarding asset or resource characterization nor their relative vulnerability to damage as based on a hazard score. And what I would say is when we have a fire suppression system, our water system, that is sketchy at best and is a concern. I'm wondering in these definitions where we get current definitions, or if these definitions are set, or if they have anything else, because they're taking these things from 2000, 2006, and they are certainly suggesting that assets really have a lot to do with a very high fire hazard zones, assets or lack of. And then at the very bottom, on the very last paragraph, the very last sentence, using the FHSZ modeling, zones vary in size from 20-acre minimums in urbanized areas. I'm not worried about the 200. I'm wondering if that is currently the definition, and if we currently are an urbanized area to fall in that definition that you can't have high fire zones under 20 acres. And on 2 of 16, it talks about wildland hazard zones, characteristics regarding expected burn probability over a 30 to 50 year time horizon. And then it goes on to talk about A zoning. I'd like information on that. It said in the wildland areas, expected fire behavior is a function on a normally severe fire weather day. That's pretty vague. What a normally severe fire weather day. When I was in the Forestry Service, we had factors that gave wind speed, humidity, and temperature. And those three factors gave us that severe day. And so there's got to be some type of function of calculating what this thing means so we can go back and take a look at the behavior so we can get a proper map. Chair, thank you.
Back to page 5 of 6. Bullet points indicate the elements of the review process for the FHSZ class. Beneath that, it makes reference to GIS-based map review procedures. I'm not aware of us having any GIS.
If I remember correctly, I got this document from the fire department, so it must be their GIS review procedures, not the city's.
Well, what I meant by, I'm not aware of the city having provided the funding for the city to be included in the GIS program. So you think that the fire department may have done it on their own for their system?
I believe so, yeah.
Could we get a confirmation of that?
And building official, just to help you along the process.
I mean, that would assume that they would know from that, the location of the fire mains, the fire hydrants, everything in the city. That's part of a typical GIS.
They have a pretty extensive GIS system that I know of.
Countywide, but I
Yes.
don't know about the city. So, okay.
Okay.
And just for further information, approximately 6 years ago, Kathy Nolan made a pitch to council, and council awarded Complete Streets about $4,500 for a GIS. And to my knowledge, it was either never funded or never completed, but it was directed and given by council to Complete Streets. So Kathy Nolan would know better than anybody on that issue
About a city system?
about the GIS system, the money and the progress on where that went, because money was awarded, $4,500. I'm not sure how far that GIS program went to complete.
The money got awarded for the city or got awarded to the fire department?
No, from the city to Complete Streets. Kathy Nolan heads up that subcommittee. She's on Planning Commission.
Doesn't have anything to do with fire.
No, but I thought that the GIS would completely map all the utilities, hydrants, and everything in the street. Am I incorrect with what that does?
I'm totally confused.
Okay.
We were talking about the GIS-based map review procedures from the fire and asking if fire had GIS system, which is, I believe that they do. So we were confirming whose system the
Okay.
fire department's using,
Okay.
I think.
All right. Well,
Because
Right.
that, typically speaking, my experience with GIS systems is it pretty much maps the entire infrastructure of an area, including things like utilities, transformers, gas valves, things that are of by their nature are of significant import to fire assessment and addressing a fire event. So, okay. Then I move to page 11 of 16. Workshop validation submittal at the top, item number 4 at the top of the page. It says FRAP, which is the Fire Resource Assessment Program. Staff will be available for one-day workshops to facilitate map review and answer questions about model development. And then there's a process for comments for review to be submitted no later than 3 weeks after the workshop. Have we ever had anything like that you're aware of? Anyone is aware of?
not in the more than 2 decades I've been here.
Yeah, okay. So, is that something that is, it's not even clear from my perspective. It seems to indicate that the local agency, which is either CAL FIRE or Ventura County Fire Department, is the local agency that's responsible for putting on, for having the Fire Resource Assessment Program staff to put on the workshop. So, who is responsible and can we get one? All right, then further down on this page, once again, is 11 of 16. The Government Code, the local review, Government Code authorized final adoption of LRA Bates areas with local political authority, that is, City Council or County Board of Supervisors. We will make every attempt to assist in the resolution of a final product adopted at the local level, but there currently exists no state authority for upward reporting of the final maps adopted for LRA areas. I don't exactly know what that means beyond, apparently once a map gets promulgated, we might modify it for our own purposes, but there is no specific methodology for reporting it back up and affecting state maps, which doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense, and maybe I've got that wrong. In the middle of the paragraph, in cases where local agencies do not either report their final adopted maps back to the Fire Resource Assessment Program, nor make them available via an open website, map data will be in the form of paper maps at local building offices. So my question on this is when was this done, if at all, and where are the maps kept? So my understanding from what you said is we have a map out in the lobby, and that's our full extent with compliance with this section of state code, which seems. Now, there are some contact information at the bottom of this, and one of them is a familiar name, Dave Sapsis. So perhaps that might be, a couple of those questions could be posed to him. He might have some information on it, since he seems to be the contact for CDF, Fire and Resource Assessment Program. I have, let's see here, page 13 of 16. There's a distinction in the fire hazard severity zone definitions as between the developed and urbanized area with a very high density of non-vulnerable surfaces, including roadways, irrigated lawns, parks, and low total vegetation cover that is highly fragmented and low flammability. These areas are classic high-density urban residential areas or commercial properties where wildland areas are removed by a large distance, that is greater than a half a mile, or if closer only present modest fire hazards. That might apply to the center of the city, depending upon what kind of fuel there might be in local stands of trees. The values that are assigned to this seem to push virtually the entire community to a value 3 of very high. Since it makes reference to wildland areas supporting high to extreme, and this is on page 14 of 16, wildland areas supporting high to extreme fire behavior resulting from climax fuels typified by well-developed surface fuel profiles, e.g. mature chaparral or forested systems where crown fire is likely. We're surrounded by mature chaparral, and we have urban forest within the community where crown fire is likely. Additional site elements include steep and mixed topography and climate fire weather patterns that include seasonal extreme weather conditions of strong winds and dry fuel moistures. Burn frequency is typically high and should be evidenced by numerous historical large fires in the areas. So at the second paragraph, the end of it says, developed areas may have less vegetation cover and still be in this class when in the immediate vicinity of a quarter mile of wildland area zoned is very high. That's virtually the entire perimeter of the community. So that's actually a question and part of a series of questions perhaps that I would pose to the representative, Mr. Potke, as it would affect and influence a revised fire map. Does anybody have anything else?
Well, not specific to this, but I think that every homeowner should be aware of the importance of getting rid of the fuel around the property, you know, of all the dead leaves and everything. And I was reading something recently about how all the dead leaves falling around, that's fuel for fire if once it gets started. And also people with the sunroofs, is that what they're called? They're plastic. Skylights. I mean, those things, if they're not glass, if they're plastic, which I think a lot of them are, or something like that, an ember hits that and it'll go right through. And also that 1-inch screening that's supposed to go around the rafters. I mean, there are things like that that people can do that protect us, but mostly just clearing all the dead vegetation around. I mean, we can all do that. You go up, we were talking earlier about someone that lives in Upper Signal, and how there are pine needles and leaves and branches, and, I mean, that's got to be cleared away.
Well, according to an analysis, this was in the November 13, Monday before last, Los Angeles Times, that they did an analysis, Times analysis of the state's maps for the highest risk fire areas in Southern California, shows about 550,000 homes are within the urban wildland interface and are vulnerable and at risk. So, and that's from San Diego to Ventura County.
But what would really help is if everyone would clear the dead branches and leaves and everything around the property.
Well, that's one of the, on 4 of 7, that's one of the questions that we had, of who is enforcing
Well,
this within the city of Ojai.
I think that there needs to be a campaign that's sent out in the community and in the valley at large, notifying people. We just saw what happened up north. I mean, those people were burned out. I mean, I don't know that clearing out the brush would have saved it, but it might have helped a little bit. We could do things like that. I think we need to have a campaign, maybe in the newspaper or something, where people understand the importance of doing that.
Well, arguably, in reviewing this, it appears to be state law.
Yeah, but, yeah, you got to remind people.
Well, no, it has to be enforced. That's what public agencies are for.
I understand, but I think that a lot of people, if you would just bring it to their attention how important it is to do that, I think a lot of people would do. I mean, I've started doing it myself around my house because I realize the importance of that. And I know it because we study this stuff. Most people, they don't. And I think some kind of campaign needs to, you know, over and above what we're doing here. People just need to know what they need to do. Don't you think?
Yeah, I don't, however, I don't agree. I don't think any kind of program, voluntary or otherwise,
Oh, come on.
would be ultimately successful, because all it takes is your neighbor not doing it, and you're exposed because of that negligence. So, you know, especially if they've got a stand of trees. That-
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so, anyway, anyone have anything else to add? Any, we don't appear to have any reports from the, either the planning commission or, the city council, so, any other?
I can act as substitute liaison.
The
Okay.
chair recognizes Mayor Pro Tem Wyrick.
No, I'm very excited about the fact that things seem to be moving on some things we've talked about a long time and finally getting to actions, you know, with CAL FIRE and Title IX reviews and all that kind of thing. So I'm very glad to see that, and that we're on a schedule and we're getting it done. With respect to your comment, Dale, this is one of the reasons I have been promulgating and promoting the idea that get your own house in order first. And if we're going to ask private property owner to do it, we ought to get the city property done as an example. And we are not setting a good example, in my opinion, with respect to city property, and all you have to do is walk down there to look at one of the worst examples of combustible vegetation, poor management practices on city land, right behind a residential area that is notorious for homeless encampments on top of that. And I just think that it's important that the city set an example. I know I'll get in trouble with the tree people. What are we doing pruning eucalyptus trees across the street from City Hall? They ought to be removed. You know? These are my opinions that I'm just expressing. That we ought to the city should get its own house in order as part of the example, as part of the public relations to do exactly what you're talking about. That's my personal opinion. And the other thing I want to mention is that this is completely separate, but something I am going to follow up on, is I saw a recent example of a review sheet for what was told to me was the non-conforming program, and something that really caught my eye in that there was a reference to Title 24 compliance in the non-conforming program evaluation sheet. And I do remember, so I'm going to get it and review it, because I do remember council taking that issue up and specifically saying we are not applying Title 24 to the non-conforming program. So I'm just going to be looking into that. I'm just letting you know, as far as whether or not, in fact, the non-conforming program review processes are in conformance with what council adopted and directed.
And when you do that, you could help me understand the program. My understanding is there are only two conditions: current fire,
Basic health and safety.
fire, carbon monoxide detector,
Yeah,
and
I'm
water.
not prepared to
and
say
water
anything
heater
about
strap.
that.
No, and water heater strap.
Right.
That's the entire limit.
No, I just
Title 24 is massive, but there's only two items.
Right, and I just want to say that the sheet, the form that was shown to me included some references to Title 24, and I remember that very clearly, that we said, no, Title 24 is not going to, current Title 24 is not going to apply to the non-conforming program. So I remember that specifically, so that piqued my interest as to something to look into and find out what is actually going on, to look at it again, to make sure just for me personally, I'm just going to try to satisfy my curiosity that whether the non-conforming program, in fact, is being handled the way the council directed. So, okay, that's it. Time to go home.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned at 9:02.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Robert. How'd you like the coffee, Robert?
Hey, it was excellent. I had